All right, so today we're going to do lesson 4.6, which is solving quadratics by factoring. So first of all, what does it mean to factor, right? So let's talk about back in elementary, right? If I ask you, what are the factors of 10, what would you tell me? What are the factors of 10? I'll wait. Type it in the chat. So what are the factors of 10? What are some examples? Thank you, Edie. The rest of y'all, there's not that many of y'all, so I'm gonna be looking for 8 people to reply. Yes, thank you, Ava. There we go, Amy. Thank you. 3 ladies. So where the rest of y'all at? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so half of you. All right, so we know what it means when I ask you of a normal number, right? What are the factors of 10? Well, you could have said 1 and 10, right? 1 times 10 is 10. Or you could have said 2 and 5. And then ta-da, that's it. How do we know that's it? Well, 3. Does 3 go into 10? No. 4. Does 4 go into 10? No. 5. Well, we already have 5, so you're done. If you go in order, right, and you're writing its other pair, as soon as one number repeats, you're done. You can stop. So these are all of the factors of 1 and 10, 2 and 5, right? So we know what it means to have factors of something. So now let's apply it to quadratics, okay? So factoring, finding what to multiply together to get an expression or product. So this is one factor because this is parentheses, right? So this is one number, and then you're gonna have this number. Well, they're factors because you're multiplying them together. And we know that when you find the factor of something, it's 2 numbers that multiply to get that number. But here, we're having these 2 sets of parentheses, and we're going to multiply them together to get this expression. So that's what this is saying, right? So we're basically going from intercept form, right? This is intercept form into standard form. So basically, now we're going to convert standard into intercept. So before we start going into the examples, I need us to understand that standard form, A is always in front of the x squared. B is always in front of the x that's by itself. And C is always going to be the number that has no x, right? So A, B, C. And yes, you better know that, or we need to know that. Intercept form, right? Basically, we want factor form. You're going to hear me call it factor form, intercept form. They both mean the same thing, right? So intercept or factor form, which means that I want the factors, okay? Well, how are we going to do this? Or why? So, but why? Okay, because we can use zero product property, refer to page 44, which is also what we used on our do now, right? So page 44, where you at? Because I just had you right here, right? So if it's an intercept form, we know we did this a few weeks ago, right? Oh crap, hold on. We can use zero product property to find the x-intercepts, and you have examples of that over here, right? Which is what we're going to be doing today to find the solutions, right? So we're going to use zero product property to find the solutions, which we know are our roots, zeros, and x-intercepts. All of these 4 things mean the exact same thing. Steps. Okay, so how do I say this? Before doing the first step, you just have to make sure that it looks like standard form. What does that mean? That means that everything has to be on the same side, and the other side just basically has to be 0, okay? So that means that you should always have an equal 0 over here. If there's anything on this side or this is split up, then you have to move it so that it's all on the same side, okay? So this is really the invisible first step. Now, check for a greatest common factor and verify A is positive. Factor out the greatest common factor or the negative from A. And this will make more sense once we do one of the examples. Identify A, B, and C. Okay, and I just told you that from standard form, right? So A is always in front of the x squared, B is always in front of the x, and C is always by itself. Because I could put these in different orders, right? So you have to know which one's which. Set up your diamond or X by multiplying A and C and B. First of all, before I keep going. This is Algebra 1. Do y'all remember this from Algebra 1? It's okay, because some kids in 6th period straight up told me that their teacher never taught it, which I don't believe. You probably just forgot because they were supposed to teach it, right? But if you forgot it, it's okay, because I'm teaching you as if you've never learned it before. I'm just kind of curious to see how many of you remember. Does anyone remember how to do this? Okay, cool. So let's keep going. Then you're going to find a pair of factors that add up to B term. Write the pairs as factors, divide numbers by A, simplify, and bottoms up. It sounds like a lot, I know. Once you get used to it, it goes a little quicker, okay? So we're gonna start with a lengthy example, okay? Then after you find intercept form, then for the solutions, you just use zero product property, which y'all already know how to do, okay? So instead of starting easy, I want to go with the more difficult stuff. So we're going to go all the way to example 10. Okay. So those of you that didn't have your notes pre-written, skip this one, that one, go all the way to the 3rd page. And right here, we're going to do this one first. Okay. So we're basically going to go to the one that would require everything from us. Okay. So example 10. The first thing, let me write it over here. I don't want to write it on mine. Okay, so here's example 10, right? So the first thing I told y'all you need to do is you need to make sure that it looks like a true standard form. Ax squared plus bx plus c, and it has to be equal to 0. This is not equal to 0. They're separated, right? So you can look at it either way. You can add 28x and subtract 16, or you can add 6x squared. I don't want a to be negative, right? So it would be in my best interest to go on ahead and add it over here. So then that way your a isn't negative. Does everyone see that, right? My way of thinking. So then I'm gonna have 0 equals, right? Because when I add it, it's gonna be 0. So I'm gonna have a positive 6x squared minus 28x plus 16. Right? So this is like our invisible first step. That's just making sure it's in standard form. Okay. Now, our true step 1. So step 1, check for greatest common factor and verify A is positive. So A is positive. Now, how do I know if I have a greatest common factor? Okay, here's the easiest way for me to do it. I'm always going to go to my smallest number, not your biggest, your smallest, because if one of these numbers goes into these, then that's going to be your greatest common factor, right? So for my greatest common factor, right, that's going to be over here. So we're going to look at 6. So what are the factors of 1 and 6? Well, 1 and 6, 2 and 3. That's it, right? So you need to check, well, 28. Can 6 go into 28 evenly? So if you have a calculator, you can just do 28. Oh, this calculator, why do I keep grabbing it? 28 divided by 6 is a decimal. So no, that's not your greatest common factor. Well, what's the next biggest number? 3. So 28 divided by 3. That's also a decimal. So no, that's not going to work. What about 2? Well, obviously, an even number is always divisible by 2, right? In 16, 16 is divisible by 2. So your greatest common factor here is going to be 2. So that means that every single one of these, I'm going to divide by 2. So this 2, since I'm dividing everything, it's going to come on the outside. So 6 divided by 2 is 3. So we have 3x squared. Negative 28 divided by 2 is a negative 14x. And 16 divided by 2 is a positive 8, right? So if you were to redistribute, you would get back the original, right? So 2 times 3 is 6. 2 times negative 14, negative 28, 2 times 8, 16. So do we see what happened there, right? So I'm just taking out the greatest common factor. So that was step 1. Step 2, identify your A, B, and your C, okay? So where am I gonna get that from? You're gonna get that from in here. You took that out so that you can ignore it for now, okay? We're gonna use it later. So right now, your A is equal to 3. What would my B be? What is my B? Type it in the chat. Go now. Private, me only. What would my B be? Thank you, Edie. What is my B? Good. Thank you, Stephanie. Perfect. Okay. Don't forget to carry the sign. So my B would be -14 and my C would be 8. Okay, so that's step 2. This was step 1, right? Taking out the greatest common factor. Step 2 is identifying. Step 3 is setting up our diamond or our X, right, to figure out my factors. Okay, so what do I mean by that? So we're going to have an X, and at the top is always going to be A times C, and at the bottom is always going to be your B. So what's A? A is 3. What's my C? 8. So 3 times 8 is a positive 24. And your B is a -14. So we're going to put -14 at the bottom. So your goal right now is to find me the 2 numbers that multiply to 24, and those exact same numbers are going to add to -14. Okay. This right here is probably going to be the most time-consuming thing out of the whole thing because it's playing with numbers. It's like a mini puzzle, right? So here's the easiest way to do it until you get better at doing it in your head. So you're going to find the factors of 24. So we just talked about how to do that, right? So the factors of 24, I'm going to go in order. So 1 times what? 24. What about 2? 2 times what is 24? Thank you, Edie's 12. What about 3? 3 times what is 24? I'm waiting on someone. 3 times what is 24? Does it go? 8. Thank you. What about 4? Does 4 go into 24? Thank you, Ava. Does 4 go into 24? Thank you. What about 5? Does 5 go into 24? Evenly? No, right? So I'm not going to write that down. And what about 6? 6 is already here, so you're done. These are all of the factors of 24. This is how you can do this on your own without having to use a calculator or whatever, okay? I mean, you can to get you better, but get better at your times table. Basically, that's what I'm trying to tell y'all, okay? So out of these numbers, okay, so remember, this is a puzzle. I want these 2 numbers to multiply to 24, which I know is going to happen, right? Now, when I add them, I want it to be -14. So what do I know about my numbers then? What do they both have to be? Does anyone know? Okay, so let me tell y'all what I told 6th period, right? When you multiply numbers, how do you get a positive number? What do your signs have to be? They both have to be positive or they both have to be negative, right? When you multiply 2 positives or 2 negatives, they're going to give you a positive. How do you get a negative? By multiplying a positive and a negative or a negative and a positive. Y'all remember this? This is going to help you. You need to know these facts, right? So if I have a positive 24, the only way to get a positive 24 by multiplying is if they're both positive or is if they're both negative. Well, if I have a -14, what does that mean? How can I get a -14 when I'm adding? They both have to be what? Negative, right? And I know that because of this. So you're using both of them and trying to figure out the numbers. So out of these pairs, which one of these is going to give me a positive 24 when I multiply and a -14 when I add them together? What would they have to be? Type them in the chat. What do you think? Which combination am I going to use? Yes. Good. Okay. So y'all told me 2 and 12, right? But more specifically, y'all said -2 and -12. Well, make sure you always double check. -2 times -12 is a positive 24. Good. -2 plus -12 is -14. Perfect. Like I said, this is probably going to be the most consuming part, just figuring out these numbers. Once you find these numbers, right? So this was step 3 and 4. right? Finding the numbers to fill this in. So this was 3 and 4. So step 5 is going to be to put it in factor form. So what does that mean? Remember, we want intercept form, right? So this is automatically what you're always going to have. These two numbers that you found, I'm going to write them in here. -2, -12. That's step 5, putting these two numbers in here. So step 6, okay, divide numbers by A. Well, what was my A? A was up here at the very beginning, which was 3, right? So that means that both of these, I'm going to put a division symbol and I'm going to divide by 3. Then my next step is going to be 7, which is going to be simplify and bottoms up. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, simplify. 2 over 3, can I simplify that any further? No, not really. So I'm going to leave that as 2 over 3 for now. What about 12 divided by 3? Well, 12 divided by 3 is 4. So I simplified. This was already simplified. Now, bottoms up. Okay, well, what's at the bottom? Everyone should kind of see, well, this 3 is at the bottom. So you're going to grab anything that's at the bottom and you're going to bottoms up in front of the x. So your intercept form is going to be 3x minus 2 and then x minus 4. Now, do not forget about the 2 that we took out at the very beginning. So you have a 2 all the way carried down. So your factor form is right here. 2 times 3x minus 2 times the quantity of x minus 4. Now remember, what is the purpose of doing this? Because we want to find the solutions. So to find the solutions, right, the x-intercepts, the roots, the zeros, you're going to use zero product property, which means you're going to grab each factor and set it equal to 0. This 2 does not have an x or anything. It's just a number, so I'm not concerned. So 3x minus 2 equals 0, and we're going to have x minus 4 is equal to 0. Add 2 to both sides, so 3x equals 2. Divide both sides by 3, so x equals a positive 2 over 3. This is one of your x-intercepts. What's the other one? Well, x minus 4 equals 0. You're going to add 4 to both sides, so x is equal to 4. So your other x-intercept is at x equals 4. Now remember, you can leave it like this, or you can also write it in curly brackets, right? 2 over 3, comma 4, whichever way you want to do it. Now, again, this basically included almost every single step, okay? It's not always going to be this like lengthy, but I wanted you to be exposed and I need you to be aware of every single step, every single time, no matter how easy or difficult the problem is. So from example 10, now we're gonna go to example 6. And we're gonna do that one together, and then I'm gonna start we're gonna do an easier one, and then I'm gonna have y'all start playing around with the other ones. Okay, so can I move on from this one? Do we got it? Okay, so example 4 now. Okay, so I recognize that there's not that much room. I should have had more room for this one, but I don't. So make sure you don't write too big and get too crazy. Okay, I'm letting y'all know now. So for example 4, what is the first thing we should check for? Type it in the chat. What is the first thing we should be checking for? You have the steps in front of you. Okay, if it equals 0, which it does, good job. So then now, what can I check for? So it equals 0. So then now I'm going to check if I have a greatest common factor. So is there a number that I can divide all of them by and take it out? What number can I divide all three of these by? Type it in the chat. So I want 8 responses. Good. So we're seeing that a little quicker. Perfect. So what number, right? All you have to do is look at the smallest number, which is this one. Can I divide the rest of them by this factor, the biggest factor of this one? So 2, right? So this is divisible by 2, this is divisible by 2, and this one's divisible by 2, which means I'm going to take out a 2 out of everything. So we're going to have 2 times 2 divided by 2 is just 1x squared. 6 divided by 2 is a positive 3x, and negative 36 divided by 2 is going to be a negative 18. Now remember, this 2 doesn't go away, right? You're just going to bring it down at the very end, okay? So now we can identify my A, B, and C from this inside portion. So A equals 1, B equals 3, and C equals negative 18. So after I identify my A, B, and C, what are we going to set up? We're going to set up our X, right? I'm going to do it over here because I'm trying to save as much room as I can. Sorry, this is ugly. You'll be fine. A times C goes at the top and B goes at the bottom. A is 1, C is negative 18. So multiplying together, that's negative 18. B is a 3, so I'm going to put a positive 3. So here's where we have to find these numbers, right? So what 2 numbers are going to multiply to negative 18 and they're going to add up to a positive 3? I'm going to give y'all some time to think about that, see if y'all can come up with that. All right, so one of you already got it. Give y'all a few seconds to think about it, and then we're going to keep going. All right, so to figure out the numbers, right, you could, right, 18, I'm gonna ignore the negative for right now because I already know one of them has to be negative, right? So I just want to figure out my factors, 1 and 18, 2 and 9, 3 and 6, and that's it. So one of these pairs is gonna give me a positive 3 when I add them and a negative 18. I know one of them has to be negative because this is a negative 18. And that's how I get a negative number, right? A positive and a negative. But when I add them, this has to be 3. So the numbers y'all gave me were 3 and 6. And y'all said that negative had to be with the 3. So negative 3 times 6 is negative 18, yes. Negative 3 plus a positive 6 is going to be a positive 3, yes. So once you find these numbers, we can put them in factor form. So we're going to have X, we have minus 3, so I'm going to write minus 3. X, we have a positive 6, so I'm going to put plus 6. Your step after this is going to be to divide by whatever A is, which is just a 1 here. So is a 1 going to change anything? No. So remember, what do we need to not forget about? We need to not forget about that 2, right? So this is not going to change anything. So your factor form is going to be 2 times X minus 3 times X plus 6, right? This 1 doesn't change anything. So this is your factor form. Now remember, what is the goal of doing this? To find your x-intercepts. So using zero product property, x minus 3 equals 0, x plus 6 equals 0. So your x-intercept here would be a positive 3, and your x-intercept here would be a negative 6 by using inverse operations. You added 3 to both sides, got a positive 3, subtracted 6 to both sides, got a negative 6. So this is your factor form, and these are your x-intercepts. That was example 4. So it doesn't matter what type of form I give you, the steps are the same. You should always be keeping all of them in mind, okay? All right, so now we did the harder examples first because I wanted you to see all of the steps being used together. Okay, but now we're gonna go to something more basic. So now let's go on ahead and go to example 1. Okay, so what is the first thing I need to check for? Type it in the chat. I'm gonna give you a few seconds to do that. What is the first thing we should be checking for? Thank you, Edie. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Amy. Good. Thank you, Anthony. Thanks for your input, Ms. Valdez. Okay. All right. So yes, you have to check, is it equal to 0? And it is. And then you have to check if there's a greatest common factor. Well, right here, remember, we said we're going to look at our smallest number, which is 1. Anytime you have a 1 involved, you know there's not really a greatest common factor to be pulled out, right? Okay, so what's next? What is my A, B, and C? Go on ahead and give that to me in the chat. Go. Identify your A, identify your B, and identify your C. Oh, good job, Ms. Valdez. Oh my God, you're doing so good. Good job, Stephanie. Oh my God. Okay, so you're giving me your A, B, and your C. What is A, what is B, what is C? For those of you that may have forgotten, remember ax squared plus bx plus c. Your A will always be in front of your x squared, your B will always be in front of the x, and your C is always going to be the constant on its own. Thank you. So we're going to have A is 1, B is 8, and C is 15. So what do we do now? Oh, that's a bad pin. Bad pin. A times C goes at the top and B goes at the bottom. So A here is 1, 1 times C, which is 15. So 1 times 15 is just 15. And your B is going to be 8, which is at the bottom. I'm gonna give you probably about 45 seconds to see if you can come up with the numbers that would fulfill our little puzzle here. Oh, some of you are fast, okay. But still, I'm gonna give you about 30 seconds to come up with the numbers that would fulfill our puzzle. Those of you that have submitted your factors so far, you are correct. Go on ahead and put it in your factor form. So the factors of 15 are 1 and 15, 3 and 5, and that's it, right? So which one of these pairs is going to multiply to 15? We already know both of them do. So which one of these is going to add up to 8? Those of you that haven't answered yet. So most of y'all gave me 3 and 5. So let's check. 3 times 5, is that 15? Yes. 3 plus 5, is that 8? Yes. So we can go on ahead and put it in our factor form. X plus 3, X plus 5. What is my next step? Stephanie. What is it? Step 6. What would my next step be? Divided by what? What is A? Exactly. So Stephanie said we're going to divide by A, which is 1. So when we divide by 1, is that going to change anything? Nope, not in this one. So X plus 3 times X plus 5. There was no greatest common factor to take out at the very beginning, so this is my factored form. Now remember, the purpose of this is to find the solutions by using zero product property. So we're gonna have x plus 3 is equal to 0, x plus 5 is equal to 0. So x equals -3 and x equals -5. These are your two x-intercepts, and we talked about the different forms that the answer could be written in. Okay, so now I'm gonna give you 2 minutes and you're gonna do example 2 on your own. When you are done, I wanna see the intercept form in the chat along with the two x-intercepts. Okay, 2 minutes. Go. And if you have questions, right now would be the time to type them in the chat so that I can go over that. Oh, y'all are so good. Look, y'all told me to divide by 8. Oh my God. Okay. When the timer is off, be ready for me to call on your name and for you to tell me what the next step would be. Just giving you a heads up. You still have about 45 seconds. If you need a little bit more time, let me know and I'll give you like 30 more seconds. Okay, so I'll give you a few seconds to type in what you have. Some of you were able to get done. That's good. Okay, so some of us got stuck, right? You were able to tell me that you were able to find A, B, and C. And then from there, you just kind of got stuck. Okay, cool. All right, so here, first of all, right here, you should see that we want ax squared plus bx plus c, right? And it has to be equal to 0. So from here, you should have added the 30. So x squared minus 11x plus 30. Now it said equal to 0. Okay, so we need to make sure we're doing that part first. Thank you for that. Okay, now you should check for a greatest common factor, right? So this was a 1 right here, so we're not going to have anything to take out. So you have A equals 1, B equals -11, and C equals 30. So A times C was at the top and B was at the bottom. So on the top, Amy, what did you put on the top? What number would go here? Amy, oh, there you go, thank you. She said 30. What about B? Anthony, what would go at the bottom? Thank you, negative 11. So what two factors? What did you get, Daniel? What factors did you, or what numbers did you get in here to fulfill the puzzle? So what two numbers multiply to 30 and add up to negative 11? Were you able to find them? Okay, so let's do it together. So if we have 30, can you tell me the factors of 30? Let's start off with 1. 1 and what? What about 2? 3? 4? 5? 6. And next would be 6, right? Which it already repeats, so we can stop. So looking at these, okay, which one of these, when I add them together, is going to give me negative 11? And what do their signs have to be in order to be a positive 30? So that's the part that can get a little tricky, right? Which is what I told y'all. Once you get better at filling in the puzzle, then this gets a lot quicker, okay? So if this is a positive 30, when I multiply two numbers, how can I get that? What do my signs have to be? The what? Mande? Yeah, they both have to be positive or they both have to be negative. Y'all need to keep in mind both of them, right? So because this is a negative, then I know both of my signs have to be negative. So I know that all of these are going to be negative, okay? So which ones? Negative 5 and negative 6, right? Negative 5 times negative 6 is a positive 30 because negative and a negative is a positive, and you add them together, negative 11. Factor form, so x minus 5, x minus 6. From here, we divide by 1, right? Because that's my a, and that's not going to change anything. So this is my factor form. Zero product property, so x equals a positive 5 and x equals a positive 6. Okay, example 3. Do y'all need a little bit more time than just 2 minutes? Would 3 minutes work better? Yeah, no? Yes, no, I don't know. Tell me something. Here, I'll do 2.5. Okay, so we're doing example 3 now. Okay. You still have 1.5 minutes. Okay, since some of you are giving me answers already, so those of you that are a little stuck, all of this has to be on the same side, right? So there's one of two things you can do. You can subtract x squared, but then you're going to have a negative x squared, and you're going to have to factor out the negative anyway, right? or you can subtract 8x and 9. I would much rather do that than have to factor out a negative because sometimes y'all mess that up. So I'm going to have x squared minus 8x minus 9 equals 0. Do we see that? Perfect. Okay. So there's several of you already giving me answers. So, okay. So you should have had A equals 1, B equals -8, and C equals -9. X method, you should have had -9 on top, 8 at bottom. So 1 and 9 are the only thing that it could possibly be. So since this is a negative, one of them has to be negative, and this is a positive, so this one has to be negative. Now, just a little hint, or I don't know if it'll help you or not, okay? When you're trying to figure out which one's negative, whatever this is, your bigger number has to match the sign. So this is a positive, so your bigger number has to be positive. Right over here, this was a negative, so you know your bigger number has to be negative, and because this is positive, that one has to be negative also. Okay, I don't know if that helped or not, but whatever. All right, now we can do factor form. So x minus 1, x plus 9. So x equals 1 and x equals -9. So these were your factors, and this is your factor form. I mean, these are your x-intercepts, and this is your factor form. Okay, we're going to skip this for now because we're going to do this at the very end. And we're going to go into example 7. So I'm going to do example 7 with y'all, and then you will do 8 and 9, and I'm just going to give you time for each one of them, okay? So why is 8 positive if I subtracted? It's not, it's negative. Maybe you just can't see it. Oh, I see what you mean. My bad. Thank you for that. She caught my mistake. Okay, so that should be a negative. I forgot to put my negative there. So because this is negative, that changes things. This should be a positive and this should be a negative, which means this should be a minus and this should be a plus, which means this is a positive 9 and this is a -1. So do we see how not writing the correct thing could totally mess up my answer? My bad. Thank you, Edie. Okay, so that's a -8. That's down here. So then because this is a negative, this has to be negative. So like my logic still stands, right? Whatever the sign of this is, your bigger number is always going to match that sign. So it's x plus 1, x minus 9. This is a minus, okay? So then that would be x equals -1 and x equals a positive 9. All righty. Thank you for that again. Okay, so example 7. We have it at equal 0 already, so check. Okay, so next, all right, so greatest common factor. So what number am I going to look at to determine if I can factor anything out? 4, 16, or 15? Okay, so the factors of 4 are just 1, 4, and 2, right? But we can already see that we have a 15, and 15 is not divisible by 4, and it's not divisible by 2. So there's nothing to take out. So there's no greatest common factor. So my A is 4, my B is 16, and my C is 15. Once you have your A, B, and C, we're going to use our X. So 15 times 4 is 60. And then your B, which is a 16, is going to go at the bottom. So what two numbers can I multiply to get 60 and add them together to get 16? Type them in the chat. I'm gonna give you a few seconds to think about that. Okay, so y'all are struggling with it. So what are the factors of 60? 1 and 60. What about 2? 2 times what is 60? Okay. What about 3? 3 times what is 60? Okay. What about 4? 4 times what is 60? Okay. What about 5? 5 times what is 60? What about 6? 7? Is 60 divisible by 7? 8? 9? 10? We already have, so we're done. So which one of these numbers? This is a positive 60, right? And this is a positive. So if they're both positive, I know I have positive numbers. So which one of these gives me 16 when I add them together? Okay. So if you can't do it in your head, then don't. Write them down and you'll be able to see it, right? A little bit quicker, hopefully. So until you get better at like your times and making sure that you strengthen that, because your multiplication is very important, make sure you have that strengthened before you start trying to do it in your head. So now that we have our factors, we have x plus 6 and x plus 10. Now remember, we didn't factor anything out, right? So this is what we have so far. Now we're gonna divide by what? Your a, which is 4. Here, you're gonna notice that, wait, I can simplify 6 over 4, right? So what is that gonna simplify to? Well, 6, they both have 2 in common. So 6 divided by 2 is 3, and 4 divided by 2 is 2. So we're gonna have x plus 3. Then 10 over 4, this is also reducible by 2. So 10 divided by 2 is 5, and 4 divided by 2 is 2. You're gonna notice that on both of these, I have a bottom, right? So you're gonna do bottoms up on both of them, and that is okay. So you're gonna have 2x plus 3 and 2x plus 5. These are both of your factors, right? Intercept form. So to find my solutions, right, we're just gonna use zero product property, and we're gonna do 2x plus 3 set equal to 0. Subtract 3 to both sides, 2x equals negative 3, divided by 2, x equals negative 3 over 2. Now we're gonna do the other one, 2x plus 5. So 2x plus 5, set it equal to 0. Subtract 5 from both sides, 2x equals negative 5, divided by 2, x equals negative 5 over 2. So these are your both x-intercepts, and this is your intercept form. All right, so go on ahead and do example 8. I'm gonna give y'all 3 minutes, and if you get stuck, this is the time to tell me when you get stuck. Don't wait until the timer is about to go out, right? Tell me, make sure you're using your steps, obviously, right? But make sure that if you have questions, right now is the time to type them in the chat. Oh, okay. There you go. So right now you're doing example 8 on your own. So there is nothing to factor out, right? Because my smallest number is 5, which is just 1 and 5, and neither one of these is divisible by 5. So A was 5. B, what was B? What did y'all put for B? Because I have a feeling this is where y'all messed up. Tell me what your B was. What did y'all write for B? Okay, maybe it's not where y'all messed up. Okay, so negative 18, and your C is 9. So then we make our X. 5 times 9 is 45. And then we want a negative 18 at the bottom. So what two numbers did y'all write in here then? Tell me that now. So what two numbers did y'all put in here? I'm trying to find where y'all messed up, okay? Because a few of you gave me almost the perfect thing, but then you just messed up in the little itty bitty spot. Okay, so I found one of your mistakes. Okay, so I wanted to multiply to this, but add to this. We know that when we multiply to get a positive, it either has to be two positives or two negatives. But we have a negative down here. So then I know it has to be my two negatives. So your answer was 15 and 3. That is correct, but they had to be negative. And some of you used the positives of that, okay? So negative 3 times negative 15, let me make sure you can see that's negative. Positive 45, negative 15 plus negative 3, negative 18. Now we can put in factor form, so x minus 15 and x minus 3. Then we divide by a. Do not forget to divide by a. So that's 5. So 15 divided by 5 is 3. And 3 over 5 is already simplified, so all we had to do was bottoms up. So 5x minus 3. So this was your intercept form. We didn't factor anything out at the beginning. So then we just use zero product property. So x minus 3 equals 0. 5x minus 3 is equal to 0. Add 3 to both sides. X equals 3. That's 1x intercept. Add 3 to both sides, so 5x equals 3, divided by 5, so x equals 3 over 5. This was your other x-intercept. Some of you got the same thing that gave me your answers, but you had negatives. And obviously you could see that they had to be positives. Okay, so in your, ¿cómo se llama? If this were multiple choice, I promise you, you would have an answer choice that would have -3 and -3 over 5. So you need to make sure that you're keeping that into account. Okay. So I'm gonna scroll that up so that y'all can finish. And then example 9, we have 18 more minutes. So we're just gonna do this one quicker because we still have 2 examples that are a special case that I wanna get through. So remember, it has to be set equal to 0. So I'm gonna subtract the 6. So 3x squared plus 3x minus 6 equals 0. Ooh, wrong color. It's okay. Okay. So then we have to check for a greatest common factor, right? Which you should have noticed is going to be 3 because everything is divisible by 3. So that means I'm going to divide this by 3, this by 3, and that by 3. So I'm going to take out this 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1x squared. 3 divided by 3 is a positive 1x, and -6 divided by 3 is a -2. So now this I'm just going to save for later. Now I'm going to identify my a based on what's inside the parentheses. So a equals 1, b equals 1, and c equals -2. So we're going to go on ahead and do my x. So a times c is -2, and then b is 1. So what 2 numbers? Obviously, this is just a 2, right? So it has to be 1 and 2. Now, how can I know because this is negative, 1 has to be negative and 1 has to be positive. I just need to figure out which one. This is a positive. So because this is a positive, your bigger number has to be positive, which means this one is negative. So we're going to put it in factor form. So x minus 1, x plus 2. Divide everything by a, which is just a 1, so it's not going to change anything. But don't forget to bring your 3 down. So this, right, divided by 1 doesn't change anything. So we're going to have 3x minus 1 times the quantity of x plus 2. So this is your factor form. X-intercepts, set each factor equal to 0. And 3 is a factor, don't get me wrong, but because it doesn't have an x, it's not going to change anything, right? Like we can't find an x-intercept from that. So we just use the one that have the x's. So add 1 to both sides, so x equals 1, that's one x-intercept. Subtract 2 to both sides, so x equals -2, that's the other x-intercept. All right. Okay, so now let's go to example 5 and 6. These are the last two we're going to do. So first of all, this is called difference of squares, right? This is a special case. Now, could you still use this method and figure this out? Well, I want to show you that you can, okay? So I'm just going to do that real quick on a sticky note. All right, so I want you to see that it still works, right? So minus 144 equals 0. This is a 1, so there's nothing to factor out, right? So you have A equals 1, B, there's no B, that's 0, and C is negative 144. So you would have your top A times that, which is negative 144, and you want the B, which is 0. Well, what two numbers multiply to that and give you 0 when you add them together? Well, this is a negative, so I know I have to have a positive and a negative. What times what is 144? 12 and 12. 12 plus negative 12 is 0, right? So it still works. So you would have x plus 12 and x minus 12. A is just 1, so it's not going to change anything, and we didn't factor anything out, so this would be your factor form. Okay, so does everyone see that it still works? Okay, so if you forget that this is a rule and you can do difference of squares, you can still do it this way and get your factor form. Okay, so that's the first thing I wanted to point out. Now, difference of squares. This is a very special rule. That's why it has its own name. Now, a squared minus b squared equals a plus b, a minus b. Well, some of you are probably looking at this and wondering like, okay, but how did you get that? Where does that come from? And how do you know it's true? So we're going to go in reverse so that you can see why it's true. Okay, so if I give you a plus b times a minus b, right? So that's this side. Okay, well, how do we multiply polynomials? Well, we already know how to multiply. We set our nice little factor, right? So a plus b, a minus b. Multiply. What's a times a? I'm waiting on y'all. What's a times a? Thank you, Edie. A squared, right? So what's a times b? AB. So what's negative b times a? Negative AB. Still the same thing, right? But with a negative. So then what is negative b times a positive b? What would that be? Negative b squared. So what do? We combine like terms. So if you have a negative AB and a positive AB, so this is what we have. Plus AB minus B squared, right? These are common terms because they're both AB. If you have a positive and a negative, they just cancel each other out, right? So you end up with A squared minus B squared, which is where that comes from. So this comes from the fact that anytime you have the same numbers, do we notice that this is the same numbers? The only difference is that one's a minus and one's a positive, right? So when you have the exact same numbers with opposite signs, these middle terms will always cancel each other out, and you will always end up with A squared minus B squared, okay? So what does that mean? So when do you use this? Okay, so we use this when there's a subtraction sign. That is the first thing you should be looking for. And when you have perfect squares. Do we remember what perfect squares are? We kind of saw an example of that, right? So a perfect square would be 1, 4. What would be the next perfect square? So a perfect square right? 1 is a perfect square because you can have 1 and 1. 4 is a perfect square because you can have 2 and 2. 9 is a perfect square because you can have 3 and 3. So what would my next perfect square be? There you go. Because we can have 4 and 4, right? So anytime you have a perfect square, you can use this rule, right? That's why we have a squared minus b squared. Okay, so how do you know if you have a perfect square? Just find the square root. So for this first example, we already know what our answer is because we did it a minute ago, right? So this is a squared minus b squared. So you're trying to find your a. What is your a? And we're going to find my b. What is my b? So my a is this x squared, right? So what's the square root of x squared? X, because x times x is x squared. So we know your a is x, and your b is 144, and yes, you're going to ignore the sign. So 144, well, what's the square root of 144? 12, because 12 times 12 is 144. It's a perfect square, right? 12 and 12. Right here, we would have x and x. So these are the numbers we're going to use. And all you have to do is put it in factor form or intercept form, right? So we have a plus b and a minus b. So we have a plus and a minus. A is x, a, so x, x. My b is 12, and you can see your b is written twice, so 12, 12. Which is exactly what we got here, right? X plus 12, x minus 12, x plus 12, x minus 12. So this is your factor form. To find your x-intercepts, you already know to apply zero product property. So x plus 12 equals 0, and x minus 12 equals 0. X equals negative 12, that's one x-intercept, and x equals positive 12, that's your other x-intercept. So for example 6, it looks like it wouldn't work, right? Because we have a plus there. But remember, a cannot be negative. So let's go on ahead and take that negative out. So if I put this negative out here, I'm going to end up with x squared minus 25. Well, look at here. Now it looks like difference of squares. So for my a, right, we're going to observe x squared. So this would be a squared minus b squared. So we're trying to find what is a and what is b. So x squared, square root of x squared is just x. So we know a is equal to x. And for your b, we have 25. So 25, square root of 25 is 5. So my b is 5. So you can just put it in factor form. So we're going to have a, which is x, so x plus 5x minus 5. So this, don't forget your negative out in the front. So this is your intercept form. And remember, you can use zero product property, right? So remember, this negative out here, because it's just a negative, it's just a -1. It's not going to affect anything. So x plus 5 equals 0, x minus 5 equals 0. So x equals -5, x equals positive 5. And ta-da, difference of squares. So let me show y'all something that would be a little bit more, it's not even that complicated, but just a little different, right? So what if I gave you something that looked like this, 4x squared minus 81? Would that be difference of squares? If you think that would be difference of squares, what would my A be and what would my B be? Alrighty. So the first thing you're looking for those of you that haven't answered, this is a subtraction, so that's good. Is this a perfect square and is that a perfect square? So this 4x squared. So the square root of 4 is 2, and the square root of x squared is x. 81, square root of 81 is 9. So is this a difference of squares? Yes. Your answer would be plus, minus 2x, 2x, 9, 9. 2x plus 9, 2x minus 9. Again, could you still do it using your x method? Yeah, sure. But I really don't want to multiply 81 times 4. That would be a big, huge mess, wouldn't it? 81 times 4 would be 324. Do you really want to sit there and find all the factors of 324 and figure out which one of those is going to give you 0? Not me. You could. I guess it wouldn't be that hard. But like I said, difference of squares comes in really handy, okay? All righty. So your assignment for today. Oh, I was working on this.